who do not know me, I'm Sean Auckland. I'm the program manager at SPEAR, which is South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource. The program that I run is called the City Efficiency Leadership Council, and this is our July monthly webinar for CELC. So I'm really excited about their presentation today with Will Ling. He's the Director of Utility Marketing for Water Furnace International. And our presentation, Future Grid, Hitting the Ground with Heat Pumps in Texas, is a pretty spot-on conversation to have at this time because of what our region experienced in Texas and lower parts of Oklahoma in this past February. So to talk a little bit about CELC, for those of you who are not familiar, it's a collaborative network of Texas cities, school districts, and other government agencies engaged in partnership and resource exchange in an effort to expand the adoption of energy management best practices in the public sector. We work in Texas and Oklahoma. We offer webinars, regional roundtable meetings, technical resources, and we assist with reporting as well as we have some developed reports as resources. So city is in the title, but we do offer these resources and conversations to all sorts of public sector entities, including counties, higher education, so universities and school districts. So if you haven't done so, we encourage you to take some time to browse our local government section on our website. Here you'll find information on local government energy reporting and more about CELC. And also we have a city efficiency toolkit. And to all of those who are attending today, you will receive a follow-up information about the program, also a survey, and then also if you have any questions or would like to get more involved. And you can also earn some continuing education credits for attending this webinar. A few announcements. So we have a SPEAR Energy Conference coming up in September, September 2nd and the 3rd, and it will be in San Antonio. So we're excited to offer this year. We know what the value is for face-to-face networking, also with the precautions with COVID in place, so that you can also have thought-provoking discussions. And we'll be covering important and current topics: electrification, building infrastructure, like legislation, and building resiliency, demand response, energy storage, all the pertinent conversations that we're having right now, and also the role energy efficiency plays into grid resiliency. There are scholarships available for all public sector and nonprofit employees. So you should be able to join the conference for free if you work for a public or nonprofit. And you can find out more if you go to cities at eepartnership.org if you're interested, and you can email me. We also have a webinar coming up called Green Schools, a Healthy and Productive Environment for All Students. And in that, it's going to talk about energy efficiency, as well as different things you can incorporate into a school environment for our students. Shivani Linger is going to be one of the speakers. She is a lead and well-accredited principal, a senior project architect, and a regional sustainability leader at Stantec. She's worked with them for over 20 years with architectural experience and also 15 years of experience in education facility design. So I'm pretty excited to have her. And she's also a fellow USGBC Central Texas Council member with me, and she's the Green Schools Chair. Then we also, on September 21st, we are having a virtual building operations certification course. And that course is on energy efficiency operations of building HVAC systems. It's a national, the BOC, the Building Operator Certification, is a national workforce training and certification program offering facilities personnel the job skills and knowledge to improve the energy performance of their buildings. So this class is actually a series of 8, and all classes are required to get the certification. But I'm pretty excited about this, and I would love for you all to share that information if you know of anyone who would be interested. And then last but not least, CEUs. We have the CEUs. You must fill out the survey to receive the CEU for this webinar. I also must see that you've been on the call the entire time. And if I don't see you on the list, I can't give you a CEU. So please, if you're calling in on a phone number, send me an email and let me know that that phone number was yours. And so here we also, before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about the chat box. Feel free to, you can go to where you see that strip for Zoom, you'll see a little bubble that says chat. That's where you can put any questions that you have. If you just have some statements to give feedback, you can raise your hand at the end of the call if you wanted to have comments or questions in the chat feeder. All questions will be addressed at the end of our webinar, so we can give our attention to Will. Also, if you have any announcements, feel free to put them in the chat box. It's going to be our primary way of asking questions during the webinar today. And make sure to select the drop-down option to send your question to all panelists and all attendees if you want folks to see your question. And you also have the option to send your question directly to me or Will. And I'm pretty excited to see what kind of questions you do have, because this is a heat pumps. People don't normally have that conversation here in Texas. So before we move on, I'm going to make sure the tech's working well, video is working well. You can see the presentation. I would like to take this opportunity for Will to kind of bring up his slideshow. So you can go ahead and bring that up. And
okay, so you have to stop sharing, I think, first.
I will be happy to.
Okay, so sharing the screen. All right.
Okay, let's see.
Can you see that?
I can. It looks great, Will.
Terrific.
Yeah, so we're going to welcome our speaker today, Will Ling. And again, he's Director of Utility Marketing for Water Furnace. And Water Furnace is also a SPEAR member. So thank you for being here. I'm excited. And Will, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before you begin? And thanks.
Sure. I spent a number of years in the U.S. Coast Guard and floating around and doing things. And then married a girl from Texas, raised some kids in Texas. And somehow we all ended up in Arkansas. So here we are up in Arkansas, where actually we enjoyed the same polar vortex as you in February. So we share a lot of weather events, and of course we have a better football team. But all that aside, I've got some great heat pump information for you, and we're going to start kind of with some general description of how it works, what it does for those of you that are new to the technology, and then we'll talk about some of the impacts that it would really have on both distribution cooperatives, municipal utilities, and the Texas grid, ERCOT overall. Today, there are thousands and thousands of geothermal heat pumps in Texas doing quite a bit of work to make it a better place. And I'll tell you why. The other thing to throw in there is that everything I'm showing today is kind of typically residential, but the same would apply for a 1 million square foot office building in downtown Houston. So we're seeing a lot of this around the country in both commercial and residential growth. And we appear to be at a tipping point across the country, at least in the eastern half of the United States. So let me show you what's going on. The screen is locked up. And when I lived in East Texas, I worked with a really great old guy named Larry, and he always used to say when we were problem solving, boy, just put the medicine where the pain is. And by golly, that was pretty good advice. And that's kind of what we're doing with heat pumps today across the country. This is a word cloud. You have heard all kinds of gobbledygook. You've heard geothermal heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, water source heat pumps, geo units, geo heat pump, lots of different ways to describe it. They're all essentially the same exact thing. Let me show you a little bit of how this might work in Texas. As I recall, a month of 100s in East Texas, it was hotter than Billy Blue Blazes, but that whole time, and even today, it's about 66 degrees under your feet, 30 feet below the ground. Every day, all summer, the temperature never changes 30 feet below the ground. So there's an interesting resource, whether you're looking for a place to put heat or if you're looking for a place to get heat. So when folks were snowshoeing to HEB in Houston, the ground underneath your feet was still in the 60s, as high as 72 degrees and as low as 62 in North Texas. So that unchanging ground temperature is really where we go and get our resources for renewable heating and cooling. And some of you might say, well, wait a minute, Texas is too hot, Texas is too dry, Texas is too humid. It's different from the rest of the world. I assure you, we've installed ground source heat pumps north of the Arctic Circle and on the equator, from Africa to Alaska. Sweden is about 25% ground source heat pumps, and Florida is just covered up with them. So south or north, dry or wet, does not matter. Rock is just as good as dirt. So what goes in, what goes out? And a geothermal heat pump has holes for water, air, and electricity. So you put just a little bit of electricity into this pump with your uncomfortable air, along with some groundwater or water from some heat source. And it pumps out conditioned air and water back into wherever it came from. So it, like a car radiator, it just circulates water in and out of the ground, or a lake, or a pond, or a river, or the ocean, or Lake Austin, for instance. If you're in Austin, there's quite a few of these on that lake. Ladybird, is it Lake Ladybird, I think? And conditioned air comes out the other side. So it's just a very simple pumping system. This is what it might look like in your house. That's a kind of a typical closet type installation. And an interesting thing is there's an underground portion. It might look like this, a vertical set of boreholes, maybe 150 feet, maybe 500 feet, depending on where you are. In upstate New York, where it gets to be 35 below zero, they do a single 500-foot borehole for a 5-bedroom house. So some new techniques and things going on there. What you may have heard even as recently as a year ago, things have changed. There's new ways of doing this, less expensive ways of doing it. And one exciting thing is I'm willing to bet 75% of you have a very noisy machine outside your master bedroom window if you own a home. Well, that part of the system actually goes away and the underground loop takes its place as the heat exchanger. So again, that ground 30 feet below the grass never changes temperature. So we take advantage of that with these heat exchangers. So if you've got a little bit of land, if you're in rural Texas or Oklahoma or Indiana, a horizontal loop is a little bit more perhaps cost-effective, faster, quicker, easier, and just as effective in delivering heat in and out of your home. One thing for those of you that have very sharp eyes, you'll notice this house has a basement, which you probably don't have in Texas. I have to confess, I spent my first 5 years in Texas trying to find the door to the basement because I'm a damn Yankee at heart. But you'll also see in the basement, there's a water heater. Almost all geothermal heat pumps are installed with a water heater that harvests excess heat from the system and for free provides most of the hot water for a typical family free of charge. So it takes that whole element out of the energy system of a home. You might need to boost it here and there if you've got teenage kids, but these geothermal heat pumps produce free hot water just as a bonus of operation. And for those of you that are technical types, we would call that a de-superheater or a hot water generator. So moving on, this is kind of what it might look like in your backyard or in the backyard of your commercial building. These are mostly commercial. You see on the top left, two pipes coming out of the ground. That's a vertical bore. In the center, you've got a horizontal trench that a guy with a backhoe just dug up and laid some pipe in it. And on the right, you've got some slinky loops that are kind of unusual, probably a commercial installation. Those are pretty big for a very large home or an office building. And in the lower left, you see a pond loop where we circulate water through this closed loop radiator underneath a pond. They'll attach bricks to that and it will sink. So 35 years ago, we installed one of those at our factory in Fort Wayne, Indiana, when it was about 20 below zero. And they installed it on top of the ice on the pond. And when the ice melted in the spring, it sank to the bottom. And it's been heating and cooling our factory ever since without any maintenance whatsoever. So this is high density polyethylene. It's the same material that the gas company uses to run gas pipe underground that lasts more than 100 years. So we're confident that it lasts 200 years. And we actually, if you choose it, as a manufacturer, if you buy this pipe from us, we can offer you a 55-year warranty on that high density polyethylene pipe. I don't know where else you can get a 55-year warranty except maybe on a wedding ring. And that's about it. So that's what it looks like. That's the reality. So here's kind of another way to look at how we're pumping heat. That box that I showed you pictures of is literally in the summertime pumping 90-degree heat that's trying to get into your house, or perhaps 105-degree heat down into that 60-degree dirt. If you think about where are you going to put the heat that you're trying to get out of your house, pumping it out into 105-degree heat is hard to do because it's already hot out there. Where are you going to put more heat? And that's sort of a simplistic way to look at it. But what we're finding in places like Phoenix is conventional refrigerants are starting to not function at 125 degrees, 120 degrees. We're losing capability to cool homes with air conditioners, which are already at 105, only operating at about half their capacity. So 60-degree dirt looks pretty good to a house that you're trying to keep at 70 degrees. That's a much easier place to put your heat. And conversely, in the wintertime, if you're trying to pull heat out of the ground, this says 55, this might be a Minnesota picture, but if you're trying to pull heat out of the ground, that's a great place to get it. It's virtually an infinite source of heat. As you know, the center of the earth gets pretty warm. And strangely, we're not sure why. We're not sure if it's just the pressure or if there's actually a fusion reaction at the core of the earth. But there seems to be an unlimited source of heat. And even if your houses are 5 feet apart, or you live in a 500-unit apartment building, there's plenty of heat right underneath your building to heat and cool that facility. Places like St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City actually have geothermal heat pumps. And other large facilities, there's plenty of heat. You don't need more footprint, you just need more holes. So that's kind of how it works. Now in Texas, you have choices, and having lived there and marketed product from there for almost 20 years, I got pretty familiar with what was going on in Texas. And I realized today that those choices have consequences. So typically in Texas, you know, the basic gas furnace is what people use, 82%, maybe 78%. Texas is the #1 market in the United States for those furnaces. High efficiency gas furnaces, you know, up to 98% efficient. That's great. Less pollution. You know, one thing that people don't realize is that if you have an 80% furnace and you buy $100 worth of natural gas to put in that furnace, a $20 bill went up your chimney. It never even became heat. It just went up your chimney. So 80% means 80%. You only get heat from 80% of your fuel, and up to 98%, I guess, with the industry best gas furnace. And then 60% of Texans actually use straight electric heat, which is exciting because it's 100% efficient. Well, yeah, but that's kind of like opening an electric oven to heat your home, which is unfortunately what a lot of people are forced to do, and which is what brought the grid to its knees. That's what took the reliable out of ERCOT in February. And then you can get a heat pump, which, could be as high as, 250% efficient until it gets cold, and then that efficiency drops down significantly, maybe as far as 1. And in the summertime, it operates just like a regular air conditioner. And then the last choice up here would be a geothermal heat pump, which typically operates between 400 and 600%, 400 being very much the low end, and 600 kind of being a high end efficiency rating. So what does that mean? Well, in the case of the electric oven in the middle, or the straight electric heat, every single kilowatt of electricity that you buy gets converted into heat, 1-to-1. So if you buy 12.5 cent kilowatt hour of heat, you get 12.5 kilowatt cents worth of electric heat. Now, if you have more than 100% efficiency, what that means is you're pumping your heat from somewhere else. And in the case of renewable energy, a geothermal heat pump, most of the heat that it's pumping is actually renewable. But that's a bold claim. What's the context of that? Here are some government ratings of EER. That's a cooling rating of energy efficiency ratio at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And what you see is air source heat pumps in the orange and the 5-ton versions in the red. That's 775,000 different air source heat pumps off of the government directory published in that curve that you see right there. So the center point is right around 12 EER in cooling mode. To put that in context, my company and most geothermal companies don't sell any heat pumps below 17 EER. They just don't sell them. Most of ours that we sell are in the 32 to 40 range EER. So typically double or triple the efficiency of heating and cooling for ground source heat pumps. You can see some numbers there in the upper right. Energy Star minimum is 17.1 for a ground source heat pump. We just don't make anything that doesn't make Energy Star Tier 3, and the COP there of 3.6. Typically that's a heating rating. That's 360% efficient. Most of ours are well over 400% heating efficiency. So that's some context. I talked a little bit about the renewable component of ground source heat pumps. Just a graphic here that shows you 1 unit of electricity goes into the compressor and the fan to make it operate. And then you get 4 units or more of free energy from the earth. And that's delivered total 5 units of heating or cooling delivered into your home directly. So that's the renewable energy that I was talking about coming from the ground. And that's both in heating and in cooling. Seems like a good way to go. Makes a big difference. Well, everybody makes bold claims about their equipment. I've made them myself. I've been in the air conditioning industry for over 25 years. And I've heard a lot of stories, and we all have reason for doubt. I recall my mother telling me that her doctor told her to have a glass of wine and a cigarette every night when she was pregnant. And maybe that's how I ended up the way I am. But government claims, business claims, who's going to believe them? Well, that was what we said. So we spent several $1 million developing a monitoring system that we've deployed for a few years now, and it's on some of our heat pumps. And we go out every 10 seconds and we check on these heat pumps, and we keep that data for about 2 years. We publish it as a 12-month average for folks like you to look at. So in Texas, I used a 12-cent per kilowatt hour kind of center point for cost of electricity. And I started looking around, and this is what our interface looks like. That's the United States today. You can see that they're kind of spread out all over. This is just, again, a very small sample of the heat pump, the geothermal heat pumps that are out there. There are millions. This is almost 9,000 of them that have been out there, representing a 9-month average. You can see most folks around the country at 12.5 cents electricity, or 12 cents, average about $1, $2, almost $2 a day for their heating and their cooling and most of their hot water. So everybody here is thinking, what's my electric bill? What's my gas bill? How does that add up? This is all heating and all cooling. Doesn't include cooking, of course, your fireplace, your gas grill, but all your heating and cooling. So 435 annual. Some of you are thinking, hey, that's my electric bill in July. Well, sorry about that. Here's an alternative. So that's the United States. Here's New York State. Down here towards New York City, a couple weeks ago, they announced $7,500 per ton rebate for ground source heat pumps. And out here in the West, it's about $5,000 a ton. So a 5-ton ground source heat pump in Westchester County is, you're getting $30,000 to install these systems in New York State. And what's interesting is this is not a government rebate. This is not a manufacturer rebate. This is the utility companies who have realized the effect that ground source heat pumps have on their grid and the resiliency of their grid and the importance of that, particularly at peak load. So those utilities, 6 of them, really 7 investor-owned utilities, have decided to put their money into this technology to help homeowners get these things installed. Fortunately, it doesn't even cost that much in Texas to put them in. It's much more cost effective. But strangely, even though costs in Texas are dramatically lower, we just have 180 on the monitoring system. There are, of course, thousands of heat pumps in Texas, ground source heat pumps. But interestingly, one thing you can compare, $666, mark of the beast in New York to heat and cool your home. Texas is significantly lower. So when those Yankees point their finger at you in Texas and say that you're energy hogs, you can remind them that that's not exactly true. It's only about $1.50 a day to heat and cool a Texas home on average. This is everything from 2-ton to 5-ton systems. And that's just a rolling 12-month average based on 10-second observations. So you see all those different colors. The very dark ones are high users. The light ones are light users. Here's a typical 4-ton unit, kind of into East Texas. I'm not sure what town that would be. Is that Humble? Maybe? No, somewhere east of Kingwood, maybe. They're 2.5 megawatt hours a year, less than $1 a day to heat and cool their home. That's pretty reasonable. And what we're not accounting for here is the fact that we're also filling their water heater with free hot water. That's a 4-ton system, so maybe a 3-bedroom house, typically. Here's one just a little bit further south and west where that red mark is. That's closer to 5 megawatt hours, but still about $1.50 a day to operate a 4-ton system. Now that's a variable speed, top of the line, great technology system that's heating and cooling that home. You can see an interesting thing. It's about 5-to-1 cooling cost over heating cost, interestingly. And they run their fan, you can see with a fan only, they run their fan a lot just for extra dehumidification and keep the air moving in the house. Here's a bigger unit, a 5-ton unit, using a little bit more power and using about $2 a day to operate. That's down in Southeast Texas. Anybody know what town that might be? I'm not quite sure, but there it is. So we've got some questions popping up. One second here about retrofitting and so on. Yes, you can retrofit. The lines underground are just circulating water. Typically in the far north, they circulate some antifreeze in there. Basically, they use salad dressing, glycol, food grade glycol. So nothing too crazy. Yes, if you have a gas furnace in your home, you can retrofit this easily, or if you have a heat pump, you can retrofit one of these as well. So why does this matter? Who cares? So a homeowner saves some money. Why does it matter to ERCOT? Why does it matter to distributors like a municipal power company? Why would they care? And why do Texans care? Well, this was a big deal. This was the week that cost 3 years. This was the week in February that cost 3 years worth of electricity, bankrupted utilities, brought co-ops, munis to their knees, put homeowners fleeing for heat and water. There's a peaker plant right near my house, and when it was 20 below zero, I called my buddy at the peaker plant, and he said, we don't have enough gas to make enough electricity. And we don't have enough electricity to pump more gas. So we got into a vicious circle, even here in Arkansas, in Oklahoma, and particularly in Texas. We didn't have enough power to pump the gas, and we didn't have enough gas to make more power. So it was a weird, crazy day, and we were all doing everything we could, setting our thermostats on 55 and walking around in ski jackets. But it was touch and go there for 10 days. How does a geothermal heat pump impact that? Well, 6 kilowatts a ton. What does that mean? That's maybe 2.5 kilowatts per house, peak load. So when power costs $9,000 a megawatt in Texas at peak load, which it did in February and probably did last week when it was hot, $9,000 a kilowatt, your geothermal heat pump, every home is dropping the load from 2 to 3 kilowatts. Scale that up, that's 300 to 400 houses taking a megawatt of peak load off the grid. So you're looking at 1,500 houses. That's about the size of a peaker plant. You get 1,500 houses on geothermal heat pumps, and you eliminate a typical gas turbine peaker plant. How do we know? In Binger, Oklahoma, Caddo Electric, now called CK Energy, has put in about 1,300 heat pumps and achieved the multi-megawatt peak load reduction and made their utility financially very robust. In fact, they've avoided $18 million in rate increases to their customers as a result of putting in these loop fields for their customers. So it's a big deal. Peak load matters. At 9,000 a kilowatt, which is the ERCOT limit to what peak load power can cost, that's a lot of money. Put that in context, at $9,000 a megawatt, it costs about $60 an hour to run a 5-ton air conditioner. So that's a lot of money. Geothermal heat pump would be a half or 1/3 of that. So beneficial electrification. I know I'm in Texas today, and I know I'm talking to Texans, but beneficial electrification is real. It can benefit homeowners. When you look at the effect of burning gas, both from a air quality standpoint to carbon pollution standpoint, it can be bad. And as the grid rapidly becomes greener and does not produce carbon, this is a great way to reduce carbon output, which apparently seems to be important these days. So beneficial electrification is a big thing outside of Texas and Oklahoma. People are talking about it all the time. It's It's a real boon. I just recently learned we bought a house here in Arkansas with a gas fireplace. When you fire it up, it says you better open the windows because all of that carbon monoxide is going in your living room. So interestingly, so did the gas stove that was in the house when we bought it. And I discovered that 85% of the heat from that gas stove goes into the kitchen, and 15% of that heat goes into the food. So these are all things that people are talking about in Massachusetts, California, Florida, Georgia, and so on. After the all-electric heat pump, you've got this major seasonal swing. Imagine you owned a business and your customers every October said, I don't need you anymore. I'm just going to buy 1/3 as much. But in April, I'll be back and I want it. I want you to serve me 100%. That's what most of us homeowners and business owners are doing to our electric companies when we crank up our gas furnace in October, typically going from about a 6 kilowatt load, running an air conditioner, a fan, all that stuff. When you turn on your gas furnace, you reduce that from 6 kilowatts to 600 watts. So it's a 10-fold decrease in your energy usage with your electric company, and you just switch it over to the gas company. That means that's a big impact on an electric grid. When you multiply that 600 or 6 kilowatts times a few million Texans, that leaves the electric company standing around all winter wondering what they're supposed to do, which is why you have electric heat strips in Texas for those folks without gas furnaces. And that created the situation you had in February. So you've really got kind of all the wrong things happening at the same time for your energy providers in Texas. And finally, unpredictable customer fuel switching. You know, when people are going from a heat pump to a gas furnace and swapping out their gas furnaces for heat pumps, it becomes, at scale, it becomes a real problem for electrical and gas utilities both, to the point where in Boston, so many people, for instance, switched over to gas furnaces, and I sold them a few 100,000 of those furnaces. They had to overpressurize the gas lines, and a few years ago, they blew up 11 houses, had 350 explosions, and killed some people, and bankrupted a gas company, because that's what you have to do when you have an overload of the gas infrastructure. So it becomes a high pressure storage system as a result of unpredictable customer fuel switching. But if you can get a 100-year loop asset in your yard or under your parking lot or under your slab, that will create a predictable long-term customer situation for your utility company. It's good for everybody. So there's one more thing that distribution utilities can consider, perhaps in partnership with their generating and transmission folks, is ownership of these loops. I mentioned the co-op in Bangor that launched into this program. Those are all over the country, really, where small utilities and now large utilities are buying and owning the loops. It's such an attractive investment that even third-party investors are buying and owning geothermal infrastructure below these buildings. It's really popular in Toronto, Canada, for some reason. And it's a great way to create a durable source of recurring revenue for over 100 years for a utility company. If a utility company has the easement and owns the loop, they can charge $20, $30, $40 a month using their existing accounts receivable system. They already have that relationship. They can generate that recurring revenue every month on a zero cost, zero maintenance asset, not zero cost to install, but once it's in place on the other side of the meter, you can still generate revenue from that. And low cost capital is available for clean energy projects from the Rural Utility Service. UESC grants from the federal government are handy. Many G&Ts are supporting their distribution co-ops and munis in doing this. And of course, if you're a municipality, you can issue your own bonds to pay for this. What we found in places like Binger, Oklahoma, is it's a self-sustaining program where the first 100 customers are paying for the next 100 customers, and you get this circular generation of cash that sustains the program, and everybody wins. So there are ways to do this. How do you do it? It's an easement is a great way to do it. It's a little uncomfortable for a lot of folks because it's on the other side of the meter, but folks have proven that it can be done. Every day, utilities are putting shutoff switches on air conditioners on the other side of the meter. So it's not a new thing entirely. But I don't know what you pay for peak power if you're a utility company in Texas. But if you're paying most of your wholesale utility costs 1 week of the year, then that's an opportunity for you to relieve that stress on your company. And no fuel switching. In October, people aren't going to be shutting you off. They will continue to use your resource. There's some numbers on the right. A new number there on the right is the 15%. So if you have a home on your grid that has a gas furnace and an air conditioner, and you switch them to a super high efficiency geothermal heat pump, ground source heat pump, even though it uses half or a third as much power, because it uses that power all year, you'll net out about a 15% increase in sales of electricity to that customer, typically. Sometimes more like 20, but that's a nice conservative number. And what is seasonal balancing worth? Is it good for your utility? I bet it is, unless you like to have nothing to do all winter until there's a polar vortex, and then you have a panic. So maybe that's important. There's a complex financial value to that, but it's worth thinking about. So, ownership of the loop, electrical only. If you're building if you're in a municipality and you're planning a new neighborhood like Whisper Valley in Austin, Texas, there's no gas ditch, there's no gas pipeline, there's no gas infrastructure going in, there's no high pressure gas pumps, there's no leaks, there's no carbon production on site. It's much more straightforward. So if you're a developer, a municipal planner, or just a utility manager, this is a great way to minimize the amount and size of investment in utilities for a new building, neighborhood, development area. Something certainly worth thinking about as an alternative. That's it, folks. This is me, my phone number, email address. I'm going to click real fast so nobody calls. Just kidding. And ready to go to questions, Sean, unless you want to do something else.
Yeah, that's great. So we do have a couple of questions. Some of them are focused on residential. And so I guess you see them in front of you. Let's talk about first, we'll answer what's the cost differential compared to a split system?
Great question.
Unit
Yep.
installation.
So I think the cheapest you're going to get in most of Texas, start with like a 3 or 4 ton installation. You might get a really quick, cheap swap out for $3,500. Typically, you're going to spend $10,000 to $12,000 on a moderate efficiency, nicer system, modern system. And remember, we've got some new refrigerant changes and new minimum efficiencies that are driving that cost up, along with terrible labor shortage. So you're going to be between $3,500 and $12,000. Some folks will spend $15,000 on an air conditioner, furnace, or an air source heat pump. A geo system of equivalent size in the same house should be between $25,000 and $35,000. Bear in mind that there is a 26% renewable energy tax credit, meaning your tax bill goes down If you install a $25,000 system, you're going to get a quarter of that back. So about $6,000 on your taxes in the next year or next 3 years, you can roll it over. So that's a big difference. The payback should be between 5 and 7 years typically. Our website and all of our competitors' websites have payback calculators, and you can type in your home address and actually get a live estimate of what that might be, your payback.
Okay, that's great. And so here's another question on what kind of maintenance is required for these units?
The underground part of the system is just plastic pipe and water. And if you're real fussy, you can have that burped every year, have it checked. Most folks don't look at it for 20 to 30 years. They just leave it alone. The above ground portion, according to the Department of Energy, should last around 30 years. We would say a little more than that with modern technology, but because the compressor in the system is inside the unit, inside the home, very, very quiet, it sounds like a refrigerator. It lasts about twice as long as an outdoor system on your existing system. So about 30 years, we'd say more.
So I guess a good question for me is if you already have the HVAC system and you'd have to move to that system, do you have to kind of make space inside your home?
Yeah, if you have a furnace in your house, this should fit in roughly the same spot.
Okay. Like in
if
the
you have
attic.
a heat pump, use about the same electricity in the same spot, same ductwork, pretty much the same. There might be a few tweaks here and there, a few $1,000s worth of adjustments, but that's about it.
Okay, great. And then here's another one regarding residential. In residential installation, if the lines are installed in a backyard, what will be the dimensions, depths of the lines? That's pretty specific.
Yeah, I think it sounds like, I think he's asking about, Pablo's asking about a horizontal installation. If you have just a real ballpark rule of thumb, we actually have free software to figure this out precisely based on your dirt and your climate and your zip code, so on and so forth. But in Texas, a 4-ton unit would require four to six pieces of pipe going out and back about 400 feet. Or you could do a big semicircle or an L or whatever. And that can be either dug 6 feet deep with a backhoe or 8 feet deep with a backhoe. Or what we're really encouraging people to do is use those horizontal boring machines you see along the side of the road all the time. That's even lower cost. In Indiana, which we're a quarter of the people have geothermal heat pumps, that's about a $5,000 loop field. In Texas, it might be 10, ballpark. So pretty straightforward. And yes, Pablo, you can put the installation. We have horizontal units and we have vertical units. We can hook up to different kinds of ductwork. We have 1 tons all the way to 6 tons for residential. And in commercial, we go up to hundreds of tons, thousands of tons in capacity. We have units that pump out just hot water, and we have units that pump out hot and cold air. Oh, here's a quote from Kelly about schools, unrealized benefits. That's great reading. The unit is not outside. It's not making noise. It's not getting rusty. It's not getting hit by hail. And as I mentioned, yeah, it doubles the lifespan. I've been outside in Texas in bad weather, and I'd rather be indoors. I didn't see the second part of the question or the answer, but yeah, it's a big benefit.
Yeah, so she was Kelly Hutton, and I posted that. She has stated, and Kelly, if you don't mind putting in the chat, like where you've built the 8 schools, a couple of benefits to commercial entity as, you know, the unit isn't outside, right, what you just stated, and the service tech can work on it anytime. And it's double the lifespan compared to a traditional AC unit, which is, you know, fantastic. And then also, if you think about a resident, you know, for myself, I'm already saving to have to replace my HVAC system that I know they'll have to replace in about 10 years. So even if you get a high-end unit, you know that there's that lifespan. So that's
right.
Fantastic.
Yeah, if you're doing the payoff calculation, if you buy a $10,000 air conditioner and furnace, well, that should be about a 12-year lifespan, maybe 15. You can milk it. Your furnace might last 20, but your geo unit will last about double that. So as you're figuring out your depreciation in your own wallet, think about, I'm pretty old, and I'm never going to have to replace my geo unit because I'll be dead. So Mansfield, Texas, I've been in those schools. They are amazing. And congratulations to you, Kelly. That's pretty impressive. Those are some beautiful schools you built. What gas is used in the lines? From Pablo, that's a good question. Because the compressor is inside the box, it's a closed loop refrigeration system. So there is no copper tube welding. The technicians don't charge the system. It's measured to 1/100th of an ounce in the factory. You don't have to touch the refrigeration system. That entire skill set can be left at the shop. You don't need a torch for anything. The refrigeration system is much like on a refrigerator. You buy it, you put it in, and you let it run. And that should be that way for over 30 years. So no real requirements to do that tricky. And as with a long history in air source heat pumps, I worked for Trane. I spent many weeks out in the field actually installing these products and learning about them and doing that. And if you've ever seen how the sausage is made, you don't want one truck Chuck putting a torch on that unit in your attic and your unit out in the yard the way that it's typically done. 70% of most units, based on TVA research at Tennessee Valley Authority, are mischarged by one truck Chuck by about 30%, which creates about a 30% reduction in their published efficiency. So that's a dirty little secret of the air conditioning industry, which is one reason why geothermal heat pump warranty charges are so low, because we just don't have to fix them, because one truck Chuck isn't sticking his blowtorch on the refrigeration system. So I wasn't going to talk about that, but you brought it up, so there you go.
So we have a few more minutes for questions. And then I was also curious, with the lines, how are they affected with root systems from trees?
Say again?
How are they affected with by root systems from trees? Over time, this happens quite a bit. Is where somebody
root systems.
Yeah.
Okay.
How are they affected by tree root systems?
Well, that's a good one. We get that same question about earthquakes in California.
Oh, okay.
And now we get that same question about earthquakes in Oklahoma. High density polyethylene pipe will stretch 400% longitudinally before it gets close to the breaking point. Sometimes you can go quite a bit more than that. Which is why the gas company can run explosive high pressure natural gas through those pipes next to trees. So yeah, the roots will work around them. They might bend them a little bit, but most installations are vertically oriented. And so they have very little exposure to tree roots below 20 feet or 10 feet. So the horizontal units, they're fine. We put them underneath forests and there's really no problem. They're typically below the root system. So yeah, you might find a way to break it, but the biggest enemy we have is one truck Chuck with a backhoe. They can always find them. Remember to call 811 before you dig. That's our biggest enemy is human beings.
Well, thank you so much for this webinar and information on heat pumps. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else did who attended. And these are some really great questions. And thank you to all of you who've attended as well. So thanks again for your presentation, Will. And a reminder that we'll be following up with an email with resources, the presentation, and the survey. And again, I hope you learned something. I know I did. And we'll see you next time.
I would like nothing better than to jump in my truck and drive down to Texas and meet with anybody who has more questions anytime.
Oh, great. Well, I put your email address in the chat for everyone, as well as a couple of people asked for more information on the building operator certification, and I put some information about our upcoming conference. Thanks again for being here, Will. You have a great rest of
Thank
the day.
you. Appreciate it, Sean.
Bye.